Good evening and welcome to Current Issues. I'm your host, Hesham Tillawi. Welcome to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, an interesting night. In the first hour, we will have Lyndon LaRouche. Some of you might have a problem with that. And as a matter of fact, I did receive a couple of emails from people who said, why would you want to be associated with Lyndon LaRouche? Well, I can tell you one thing. We believe in free speech, and having a guest on the program does not mean that you are associating with that guest. I believe everybody in this country has the right to say whatever they want to say, and you have the right to hear whatever you want to hear. But taking some opinions and some ideas away from you, I believe this is un-American. I believe it is up to you to decide what is what. We will talk more about Lyndon LaRouche, and we will have him shortly. He will tell us what's going on in the world. As you know, Lyndon LaRouche has made a bid for the presidency of the United States 5 times. The last one was in 2004. As a matter of fact, he was on the primary, on the Democratic primaries in 19 different states. So, anyhow, the war supposedly in Lebanon, it stopped. At least the shooting, it stopped. But who won the war? According to President Bush, Hizbullah lost. According to the whole world, Israel lost. Well, if wars are measured by how many babies you kill, Israel won. If wars are measured how many homes, civilian homes, you destroy, Israel definitely won. If wars are measured by how many were injured, how many babies were injured, then definitely Israel won. But wars are not measured with that particular stick. The measuring stick, ladies and gentlemen, is the objectives of the war. Now, Israel's objectives, none of them. The release of the prisoners, they're still prisoners. Hezbollah still has his arm, and they have not been pushed north of the Litani River. And in my estimation, I don't think they will ever be pushed north of the Litani River. So none of these objectives were met. So Israel lost. But on the other hand, Hezbollah, also his objectives were not met. Wanted the Israelis to leave the Shebaa farms. They're still there. And even a little bit more of Lebanese land. Wanted the release of his prisoners. There's 3 Hezbollah prisoners. One of them has been there for like 28 years. Well, they're still there. So who won? No one. The Lebanese people lost. The Israelis lost miserably. But there is, if you really look at it, there is, in a way, one side lost and the other side won. Hezbollah, if we are talking about Hezbollah, Hezbollah won definitely. This is the first time that an Arab force forces the Israelis on actually asking for the ceasefire. You see, what you don't know about is the ceasefire that took place. Of course, I'm glad it took place because it stopped the crazies in Israel from killing more babies in Lebanon. But the Israeli army got his ass whipped, big time. Big time. They have landed hundreds of Israelis behind the front lines. Those armies, those troopers, those soldiers had to walk back to Israel. They could not even feed their soldiers in the front lines. And their chief general, whoever, has actually allowed the Israeli soldiers to loot Lebanese stores and homes to eat. That is against the law, international law. You cannot loot places as an invading army. You cannot loot civilians' stores. Now you can ask, you can requisite the local authorities, but you cannot loot their stores. Also, ladies and gentlemen, we told you that this war was not just due to Hezbollah taking 2 prisoners, because an hour or 2 hours after Hezbollah took prisoners, the Israeli chief of staff, General Halut, H-A-L-U-T-T, I think, he had sold a lot of stocks in his portfolio just a couple of hours in after Hezbollah took those prisoners. So in this country we call it insiders trading, because he knew something that the rest of the people did not know. But he knew that the war was on, or it will be on in a few seconds. Okay, so according to my estimation, I believe Hezbollah won Israel, and that's the win and the defeat that I'm talking about here. It is not like actually because none of them was able to actually get their objectives that they had put before this confrontation. But definitely, the myth of the Israeli army, the army that cannot be defeated, it was defeated. So anyhow, I believe we do have Mr. LaRouche with us. Mr. LaRouche, can you hear me? Okay, I can't hear him. Mr. LaRouche, are you with me? Are you with me? You probably can hear me, but I can't hear you back here in the studio. So let's see what we can do. Can you hear me? Okay. Can you hear me? Oh boy. This sort of things only happen when we have an important guest, doesn't it? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, he's off? So was he able to hear me, or? Okay. All right. Well, apparently we lost connections with Mr. LaRouche, so let's see if we can get him back on. Hoping that we normally...
You guys hear us?
Yes, are you there?
Well, we can.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Probably is.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I hear you now.
Okay, good, great. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. LaRouche, you have made a bid for the United States presidency 5 times, and I believe the last time it was in 2004. Now, I want to start, we're going to go back a little bit and then talk about your efforts and what you are doing. But let me just ask you one quick question. If you made it in 2004 as the President of the United States, would this world be any different than from what we have now?
It would be absolutely different.
Tell me.
I think perhaps somebody didn't want me to do what I would have done. And that was the best way to keep me out.
So what would you have done after September 11th?
Well, September 11th wouldn't have happened, because September 11th was something done to foster what followed. That means there were people who were used in that attack, but we knew the attack. Matter of fact, on the beginning of January of 2001, even before George Bush was officially christened or whatever, that I had warned of two things. I said, we've already have an international monetary financial crisis coming on. Bush is stupid and can't handle it. And therefore, the thing you have to watch for is that sometime in the near future, someone is going to pull something that, like Hermann Goering did in Germany in setting fire to the Reichstag, to make Hitler a dictator then and Bush now. The September 11th of this 2001 was the equivalent politically of a Reichstag fire. It was set by people who we don't know exactly who was involved in running it, as opposed to who might have been some of the people who were used in it. But this was a destabilization. Now you see today also, you see the attempt of Cheney in the case of this agreement, which sent Israel into Lebanon against Hezbollah, was said the same thing. The target was actually, to some degree, Syria, which was intended to be targeted for a military attack, and also Iran. So what you see is a method, which is the characteristic of this administration, of using provocations of that type as a way of starting wars of a certain kind. And that the 9/11 was simply the first part of that. Therefore, if I'd been in charge as president, there would have been changes that have been made already, which would have prevented something like that from happening.
So now, let me see if I understand this correctly. If you were the president of the United States, September 11th, you're saying that maybe September 11th would not even have taken place?
Absolutely, because the purpose of...
So you're saying that George Bush had something to do with September 11th?
I don't think George Bush had the brains to have anything to do with it. I think that someone, however, was on a much higher level than President of the United States. Anglo-American, etc. crowd. This crowd I'm familiar with. They would do it, and they could do it.
Okay. Now, sir, you are revered by people who like you, as you have a unique political ideology that will turn this country around, but then your opponents think you are nothing but a conspiracy theorist who don't know what he's talking about. So tell me, why would this country be turned around if your political ideology is the one that we've been running on?
Well, first of all, my opponents who make remarks like the ones you referred to are just plain stupid. It's the worse than stupid. Because in the immediate post-war period of World War I, World War II, there was a scheme set up with people like the fellow called Professor Sidney Hook and Abel Lerner and many other people, which were the intention was to brainwash the people of the United States, but especially those who would be born in the period from 1945 on, especially from 1945 to 57, to brainwash these people in a certain kind of ideology. And one of the things they said, because I think everyone who's sane knows that you couldn't cook a menu, you couldn't have coffee served in a restaurant without a conspiracy, that nothing works in society without a conspiracy. And when someone says, I don't believe in conspiracy theories, you know they're either lying to you or they're a nut. And actually, there are not that many people who fit that category in the United States. So even though some of the press and so forth circulate that kind of garbage, nobody who's serious actually believes that kind of thing about me or anybody else.
Okay, you are credited, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on this one. I just want to my viewers to know that you are credited with engaging the Soviets back during the Reagan administrations, with talks which led to the development of the Strategic Defense Initiative.
That's right, there was it.
In what capacity did you do that?
Well, first of all, I started out as I was running a presidential campaign in 1976. It was on the Labour Party ticket at that time. but in the course of my functioning in the campaign, I came across the evidence which involved Henry Jackson, called Scoop Jackson, and also involved some high-level people in the incoming Carter administration around Brzezinski. They had revived the Congress for Freedom, and I had some of their correspondence, what they were plotting. So I put it on the air and announced the intention of, if Carter were elected under Brzezinski, that the crowd behind Brzezinski intended to go ahead with a nuclear confrontation with the Soviet Union of that type. So I put it on the air, and I put it on just before the election in a half-hour NBC TV broadcast, and that caused quite a fuss in the country. But in the process, I was concerned that with the Brzezinski administration, because Carter really wasn't running these kinds of things, that was going to continue. And I was therefore concerned to try to prevent the United States from getting into what I knew would be a very dangerous thermonuclear confrontation. It could be set off. And therefore I said the time has come to put an end to this kind of what Reagan later called revenge weapons kind of policy. So I worked on this. I defined the scientific capability of setting up what became known as the Strategic Defense Initiative, and I was right. Other people came on board. I used that as the platform of my first Democratic Party presidential campaign for the use of preventive negotiations to prevent nuclear war, the alternatives. Then when Reagan was elected, I'd had a conversation with him, and I met many of his people, and I was called into Washington to give my opinions on what the new administration should do. So I put this on the list. Reagan liked it. The operation was run through the National Security Council, which I was responsible to in this connection. I ran a back-channel discussion with the Soviet government at that time. The intention was to reach an agreement under which would bring many countries in. But the idea was to use the technology that we had for nuclear power, nuclear weapons in particular, but the scientific power, because the Soviet Union was a bummer as an economy in terms of its management, but in terms of its military and scientific capability, it was quite capable. And therefore my argument was, well, if we can cooperate on avoiding a confrontation and use these high technology capabilities, which we're using for military purposes, and direct them in certain directions, we can develop systems which would prevent any third or fourth party from using weapons to start a war. But we could also use the same technology to change the character of the world. And we had people like Ed Teller came in on this, and we had a meeting in Erice in Sicily, where he said, the common aims of mankind. And that was my idea, was that if we can get countries engaged, and you have the same thing today in the so-called Middle East, if countries are engaged in the common interests of mankind, that is a positive goal, then they can deal with the negative ones. If they have only negative choices, they will continue to try to find out how to kill each other. So that was the point. And what happened, of course, when the Soviets told me they weren't going to accept it, this was in 83, so February 83, I told them then, I said, what you're going ahead with your policy, the Soviet system, you'll collapse in about 5 years. And they collapsed a little over 5 years, 6 years in point of fact.
Okay.
But then what I had proposed was not done. Reagan was out of the presidency at that point, leaving it. And so therefore, what should have been done, what I intended should be done, was never done. And therefore, we come to a period in history now where we should have done that. Instead of ruining Europe and ruining the United States and ruining the former Soviet territory as we have done, we have ruined the whole world economically. We're on the verge now of the worst financial and economic collapse in modern history.
Okay. Sir, if you just stay with me for a couple of seconds, we're going to take a break and we'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are speaking with Lyndon LaRouche. Mr. LaRouche, you said you knew the Soviet Union was going to collapse. Now, how long is it going to be before our system? I know you are an economist, and you know that probably the war that we will lose, and lose miserably, is the economic war. How long is it going to be before we lose that war?
We are already losing it. These things do not come in a simple event on a single day, though they may come that way, but they're not caused to come that way. It's like an automobile accident happens at a particular time with certain people, but the things that cause the automobile accident are built into the highway, the drivers, and so forth before the accident happens, that sort of thing. And that's where we are today. We're at the end of the system. The entire international financial monetary system is now in a process of collapse. It is already collapsing. There is no recovery. There has been no recovery. We're on the blowout of the entire financial system with a crash which is much worse than we knew from between 1928 and 1933. That's where we are. We're already there. The housing bubble in the United States is crashing in about 29 states. The rate of the crash is not constant among the states, but it will accelerate. We have the major banks of the United States and of some countries of Europe are involved with giant hedge funds investments. Those investments are going to blow out, or most of them. This blowout will blow out every bank in the United States. We're on the edge now of that happening. You cannot predict the exact days it will happen, but you know you're in the area where the accident is going to happen sooner or later.
So is it going to be an overnight thing?
Well, it could be overnight. As that is, the accident happens, it can be overnight. But it could be something which one thing crashes after another. And that's what's happening now. Look, we've lost about one half of the auto industry just now. There's going to have chain reaction effects upon the entire country. Agriculture is almost dead in the United States relative to what it was once. We've lost most of our industry. We have moved from being a nation where county by county, you look at them, that we used to have industrial and agricultural economies, now you have service economies. Service economy meaning restaurant workers, other cheap labor. So we have people working at cheap labor where they're not productive and where they don't make much contribution to the tax revenue base of the county or the nation. Whereas you have the loss of those industries which once made us prosperous. And so we are already, in a sense, destroying this country and destroying Western Europe in particular. And we're on the verge where the whole thing is about to come down. We can deal with it. I know how to deal with these things. But the inclination is, as long as you have this presidency in the United States in particular, there are other countries also that represent problems, but the United States government today, under Bush, or nominally Bush, is the first on the list to go under. We are finished. Look at the U.S. economy and the military strength of the United States in 2000, November 2000, when the election occurred. Now look at it today. What's the military strength and credibility of the United States? Yes, we have some super destructive weapons, but look what we're involved in. We're involved in Southwest Asia as a whole, which means Afghanistan. It means all of the so-called Arab sector, essentially, and other parts of the world are in a process we call asymmetric warfare, and typified by what happened across the borders in Lebanon. Asymmetric warfare. And the Israelis were defeated militarily, not by regular warfare methods. They were defeated by asymmetric warfare, that is popular warfare. And this is the condition of the world. The world is ready to blow up for social processes, economic processes, and so forth are breaking down. And we're at the end of the system. We can no longer continue to operate the way we're going.
Okay, so where are we going?
Well, that's where I intend us to go. My concern is we had this event, of course, in the UN intervened finally to try to bring the Israeli war across the border into the Litani section of Lebanon to an end. It had to. It was asymmetric warfare. It potentially was intended to be used to get the attack on Iran and Syria going.
Now,
but we had to stop it. So now the UN finally did something which brought the shooting, or the main part of the shooting, to a halt. But nothing has been essentially solved. We have stopped this particular shooting, but the danger of new outbreak exists. So we've come to the point that we can solve the problem. And we have this Israeli figure, Yossi Beilin, who played a key part in the Second Madrid and some other negotiations and seeking peace in that region. And that is what is needed now. This is not needed simply to make peace. We have to finally find a peace among the peoples of the region, and it must be on a positive basis, which must therefore include economic development.
Now, Yossi Beilin, he is for the two-state solutions, but most of the parties in Israel who can make a difference, they're not for that. They are basically for taking the whole piece. And if we look back at the the strategy for securing the realms, which basically a lot of people think what we are seeing today is an implementation of that policy, very much Yossi Beilin does not have a voice. So where do we go from here? I know you support Yossi Beilin in this effort, and I think it should be. But that's not what's going to happen. We're probably looking at Netanyahu coming after Olmert, and what's going to happen? Are we going to see a third world war, which everybody was calling this one a third world war? Is this the first battle of the third world war?
No, it is not. It could be it could be the end of civilization, but it's not. This is not the battle. Israel is a puppet. That it has been a puppet. That doesn't mean that everybody in Israel intends to be a puppet. It means that in the post-war period, things were arranged where Anglo-American forces principally orchestrated the entire region, and the Israeli factor in the region was part of the orchestration. The Israelis essentially have become increasingly puppets of the Anglo-Americans, with really more British influence than most people realize. So we've come to the point now that Israel is not in control of its own destiny. And what the current leading political parties in Israel are going to do is not necessarily going to determine what happens inside Israel. For example, take our own country. Look at the U.S. Democratic Party. The Democratic Party, in the Senate in particular, acted very nicely, shall we say, during the year 2005. Most of it. They made some mistakes and so forth. Generally, we're moving in a positive direction. Since about mid-February, since the Alito nomination business, the Democratic Party's been a mess. Up until the time we finally got this break with Lebanon, the Netanyahu of Connecticut. Right? So, but the Democratic Party is behaving terribly right now. But I know from the inside that there are forces inside the party which are patriotic, and which realize what the interests of the United States are. We also
How many you call patriotic in the Democratic Party?
Oh, I think the majority are. They actually are. They may be a little bit confused. They may be badly behaved.
So if they are patriotic, why? You know the interest of Israel was never the interest of the United States, unless I'm wrong here, and if I am, correct me. Because what we have been doing for Israel, it is in no way that it is benefiting our vital interest in the world. So these people that are voting 98-2 whenever we have something for Israel and 400 and something in the House of Representatives, I cannot call these people patriotic, because to me patriotic are people who care about the country and about this country that we are in, about the nation. But when you go for things for Israel, that is not patriotic. So how could you say that these people are patriotic?
Oh, wait a minute. It's not this. You can't judge patriotism on one issue, first of all. But in this case, look what the reality is. This war, which Cheney and company were immediately responsible, together with Netanyahu, for creating, is part of the Bush administration policy. That's how this thing happened. They planned it as a way of getting into attack on Iran. They were going to go at Iran directly from another way. That didn't work. We blocked that. And now they were going at it by starting this war and going at the Hezbollah in Lebanon. They were going to use that as a way of getting in.
But how many Democrats, Mr. LaRouche, how many Democrats voted for the war?
But all of them did. But that doesn't mean that they're not patriotic. That means that they are, shall we say, like a prostitute who may not be loyal to her client, but she's loyal to the money the client delivers or something. The point here is, look at the war itself. This war was not in Israel's interest. You can't call any Israeli who voted for the war against Lebanon, you can't call them a patriot. Because what they were voting for was the destruction of Israel. And despite all the talk by this crazy president of ours saying that Israel won a war, they didn't win anything. They lost.
So is that why their soldiers were defeated on the battleground? Because even their own soldiers did not believe in what they were fighting for?
No, because they were fighting one kind of a war without a purpose, and they were fighting against a trained force inside Lebanon with the support of the majority of the Lebanese people to defend their country. And you had a militia force called Hezbollah's militia force with support prepared to defend the country. Now you have the same thing. Bush says he's winning the war in Iraq. He's lost Iraq totally. It's destroyed. We've lost Afghanistan, and the Taliban are coming back. What we've got in the whole region is a process going on which people who vote in the Senate or elsewhere don't know what the devil they're doing. They may have patriotic instincts. These guys think they have to vote that way. Some say they want the Jewish vote. But that's crazy. It's wrong. If you really have courage, if you're a politician, you stand up against your constituency when your constituency is wrong. You don't support somebody because they like it. You support somebody because you think that you should support what they're standing for. And when these congressmen voted on this to authorize this attack across the border into betraying the United States, but they're not traitors. They're just baby boomers. They're people who were affected by our culture, our liberal culture of the post-war period, and they don't vote morals. They don't vote facts. They vote deals. It's like, look, we've got people who are funding large parts of the Democratic Party. I know them as members of organized crime. The Democratic Council, DLC, a key fundraiser, is composed of people who represent either organized crime in the technical sense but otherwise in the functional sense. Like Rohatyn is absolutely organized crime in the moral sense. And the Democratic Party allows itself to be controlled because they want the money to win the election. And so they vote for this way, they vote that way, not because it's right or it's wrong, but because they're acting like prostitutes.
So why did you run under the Democratic ticket in 2004?
Because I'm with the lower 80% of the family income brackets of the United States, and that's where most of the Democratic Party is. I'm with the people. We want to correct leadership. That's what you have to do. You have to change the quality of leadership. We did fairly well in 2005. We did defend Social Security. We did defend a few other issues. It was worth doing, and Democrats did it, and also some Republicans too, if the truth be known. But we got a situation where they sold out because there's an election campaign and they wanted money. Their argument is the toughest argument. We need the money to win. Do you want them to win, or do you want us to have the money to win? I say you're crazy. Stop talking about buying the vote. Why don't you just go out to the people? 80% of the family income brackets in the United States who are essentially out of politics and having any influence over it, who are suffering. Why don't you go to them? They vote, you know. And why don't you get the vote of the people by supporting the people instead of trying to buy their vote? So I'm very much against this kind of corrupt politics.
Okay.
But the point is, if you don't like the party leadership, well, you change it. Change it in one or two ways.
Okay. Let's go back.
Or change the members.
Let's go back to the Middle East and see if you were the president. Now, are you running in the next election?
I don't plan to.
Okay.
I plan to try to orchestrate what the Democratic Party does.
Okay. Now, if you were the president, what would you do? Do you have a plan to solve the Middle East conflict once and for all?
Yeah, sure. We've known what it is all at the beginning. If you apply the principles of the Treaty of Westphalia to that entire region, the other part of that is, in applying that, you have to look at one thing, and take, for example, water. Now, if anyone who's flown over that region, and of course I've number of flights past there, say from places like Sudan across Egypt, into the Arab world and so forth. And I've been into Lebanon. I was in Iraq. I've seen the area. I know something of the history of the area and also of its physical geography and how that's changed. So you look at the area and you say, well, first of all, there's too much useless sand and not enough water. We know how to do that, but there's not enough power. Take the case of the territory of the state of Palestine, Israel and Palestine today. There's not enough fresh water available to meet the needs of the people of that region. And somebody's trying to bring more people in, but no water. There is a way of doing that, nuclear desalination. The Israelis are allowed to have nuclear power. Why don't we have nuclear desalination for fresh water for those people? Why don't we think about the rights of people in that area to water, to take the area, which is in many parts arid, which can be developed over a generation into a rich area, which can support a larger population in good health. So therefore you need two things. You need a Treaty of Westphalia approach, where you say the first thing we should concern about is not our interests, but the other guy's interests. We should do something for him. And that is the only way to get peace. But it has to be buttressed not simply by good intentions, but it also has to be buttressed by good deeds, which realize good intentions.
Okay, so, but tell me, how would you force the parties to go along with your plan, where you have a Palestinian state, where you have Israel, and everybody lives happily after?
It's not that simple, as you know. This is an area of... But look, take a comparison. Let's take the period from 1492 to 1648 in Europe. You've got a comparable situation. You had an area in which, in Spain, for example, Muslims, Christians, and Jews were living together. Now, there were wars in that area, but the wars were civilized wars in it by a comparable sense, and they got along. They didn't have religious war. Right, so in 1480, you had this fellow, this Torquemada, this Grand Inquisitor, came into the picture and began to start a race war. And 1492 expelled the Jews and condemned the Moors, who were later expelled, about a century later. So from that point of the expulsion of the Jews from Spain and the Spanish Inquisition faction's introduction of black African slavery into the Americas, you had a period of religious wars of every kind.
Mr. LaRouche, I hate to stop you here, but I want to know, if you were the President of the United States, how would you go about getting this done?
You do it by crisis. You have a crisis now. The entire world financial system is coming down. It's coming down in its present form. That's inevitable. Nothing can prevent that crash in terms of present policy. You have a situation, an insufferable situation in every country of Europe, in most of the Americas, in most of the world. You have a situation where people are screaming, give us a solution. Under those conditions in history, as in the Treaty of Westphalia, it has been possible to go against all current trends up to that point and introduce solutions which bring about an improvement in society. We're in such a period. It will not come from the spontaneous, democratic, etc., from within the people. It will come because they know that all of the things they've been doing, all the things they thought they were fighting for, would not work. And they know they have to change, they have to do something different.
Now answer me yes or no. Do you think a President of the United States will have enough power to tell the Israelis, get out of the Palestine to your 1967 borders, tear down the wall, and have a Palestinian state? Yes or no?
I think with the right president and the right connections, yes. If I were president,
and you don't
yes.
think he's going to have enough forces on the outside pulling down on him to pressure him and force him with Lewinsky scandal type that he would back off?
Oh, well, the point is if he doesn't have the backing, if he can't get the backing, if he doesn't have the nerve, and I think the president at that time should have had the nerve to, but he'd had to dump Lieberman at that point. But anyway, but no, if the president of the United States is serious, he's putting his life on line as president if he does things like this. Just as Kennedy was killed for that kind of reason, the real reason. And that's why Lincoln was killed. That's
that
why
bad?
other presidents, McKinley's been killed. So therefore, any president who does something like you suggest is putting his personal life on the line.
That's what I thought.
That's the only way that
Mr. LaRouche, stay with me. We're going to go to the phones, and we're going with Dale on line one. Go ahead, Dale. Dale?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, gee, I'm so glad you had Lyndon LaRouche on, because I agree with everything he's saying. I think that this administration is totally based on greed. And there's one question. I hate to get away from the Middle East because I'm so interested in what he's saying. But all this immigration stuff from Mexico, having visited Mexico and knowing that the government they claim is democratic, which isn't, only because they have elections. I'm just wondering, because the United States was totally pushed out of Mexico in reference to the oil industry, if not, this legislation doesn't have something to do with trying to get back into Mexico so that we can get back into the oil industry.
Okay.
And I'll let you have it now.
Thank you.
There are people like George Bush's crowd who would like to steal Mexican oil. They do that kind of thing. That is not what's going on now. What's going on now, we have the attempt to impose really a fascistic government on Mexico. And the effect of that is terrible for the United States, because look at the largest single so-called minority in the United States today is composed of people of Hispanic language origins, mostly from below our borders. The largest component of this group are Mexican origin. The most significant component are people from northern Mexico, from extremely poor areas, who come across as legal or illegal immigrants. Now, what we're doing now is the United States government policy, which is putting pressure on the present president of Mexico to repress people, repress the Obrador government, which actually was dealt with a vote fraud against it. To suppress that is creating a crisis such that you may have a social crisis in Mexico, which will aggravate the problems inside the United States itself, which means that we've got people in the United States who are insane, who think the Mexicans that are our problem is the way we treat the Mexicans that is our problem.
Okay.
Now, the Arabs the same thing.
Now let's stick with this immigration thing that is driving everybody's crazy. Do you think we can ever? I mean, there's a lot of people who are saying take these people back to Mexico. Do you think that will ever happen?
Well, it's something like that can happen in part. Remember, in the states of northern Mexico, the northern tier, you have largely agricultural areas where people in these areas cannot make enough to live. They come across the border because they're desperate because of the economic conditions in northern Mexico overall.
But you know, let's not look at their benefits. Let's look at our loss if we do actually send these people back. Are we going to be able to afford that?
No, we can't afford it. It's a bum idea. What you'll have is some people will want to go back if we help create the conditions in northern Mexico where they can rejoin their families.
So you think we're going to be accepting the 12 million that are now illegals, 12 million illegals, you think we will be accepting those as citizens?
I think so.
And then what we're going to do with, because remember, Clinton did this same thing about 10 years ago. Now you think we're going to be doing this same thing 10 years from now?
The problem is economic. The United States economy is collapsing. We have been downshifted from an industrial and agricultural economy to a service economy. We are bankrupt. We are bringing in poor labor from northern Mexico, virtually slave labor, to work on cheap jobs inside the United States. Our objective should be to restore the economic vitality of the United States, and to help Mexico also with its vitality, encourage people who want to go back to Mexico to go back to a land of opportunity in northern Mexico, that is if they're illegals or want to go back there. But those who are part of our country, the problem is simply we are not providing the opportunity for them or for others needed to build up our own country. Our country is collapsing and disintegrating, and that is the root of this problem.
Okay. Can we, I mean, are we going to attack Iran? And if we are, can we afford to attack Iran?
Could we attack Iran? Yes. Could we afford to? No. Is there a tendency to do so? Yes. So the problem is you've got to get rid of the guys who intend to do it.
John Hagee was in Washington last month, and I'm sure you know who John Hagee is. They're starting another AIPAC sort of political action deal where they say they represent so many, I guess, about 30, 40 million Christians here. Do you see any collusion between AIPAC and John Hagee's group?
I think, insanity tends to find affinities, strange kinds of affinities. You look at the Tim LaHaye operation. Tim LaHaye has a very specific kind of, he's a key in this thing. And there's some others in the same thing. They say, we're going to go back, have the Battle of Armageddon. We're going to take over the Middle East. We're going to ask every Jew to convert to Christianity immediately or be shot. And so what you have is that kind of mentality, that kind of insanity. And what has happened is, with a demoralization of our country, which has occurred with the mistakes, especially the past 40-odd years, we have demoralized a whole section of our country, especially among the so-called tweener generation. If you look at any large mass meeting of these wild-eyed fundamentalists, wild-eyed types, you look at the audience. Don't look at just at the people on the podium. Look at the audience. And the audience are tweeners. And what happens is they look at the immorality of their parents' generation, and they go back to a kind of super morality, which is not morality, it's just totally irrational. And they have wild-eyed beliefs. Remember, in the 14th century, in Europe, you had a phenomenon with a breakdown of society, with the Great New Dark Age, and you had a flood of what were called flagellants, who were very much like these tweener fundamentalists, traveling all through Europe, destroying Europe from the inside as a social process. What you're seeing is among the radical lunatic variety of fundamentalists, you're seeing that kind of a process, and it's extremely dangerous.
But, I mean, this is like Israel is using a credit card, enjoy now, pay later, because John Hagee's group, they're after Armageddon, and they're going to be forcing and fighting to the last Israeli. And if Israel doesn't give them Armageddon, they're going to be pushing Israel to give them Armageddon.
Well, I think we have a mass insanity phenomenon, and I think it's the problem and responsibility.
The thing that kind of it's interesting and funny at the same time. They want Armageddon, and we are about to have Armageddon, but these people are still down here. They haven't raptured up and sitting on the right-hand side of God, looking down at us. They're still here with us. Can't they see?
God wants no part of that.
Can't they see that they're still here with us? They haven't raptured yet.
Well, the problem, we've seen that before in history. This is on a larger scale. We saw that, for example, even before Aaron Burr's grandfather, who was also the head of a university in New Jersey, up and down the Connecticut River Valley was doing this kind of thing and building up this kind of lunatic then inside the colonial period of the United States. So we've had these things off and on in our country. It's a form of mass insanity. It has no relationship to actual Christianity. It's just a wild-eyed cult, one of many. So we have these problems, and the only solution for these kinds of problems is to give people a high standard of culture and a decent standard of living and opportunity, and don't drive them crazy.
So I guess now both of them, I want to go back to, I'll tell you what, let's go, because we don't have much time left, let's go to a caller on line one. Go ahead, caller.
Hello.
Yes.
Basically, I want to make a comment on something that was mentioned before.
Yes.
You were talking about illegal immigration.
Yes.
Concerning, I guess, sending 12 million Mexicans back to Mexico.
Yes.
Okay. I think actually part of the Bush administration policy is that they don't actually want that to happen. If you remember last year in March, Vicente Fox, Bush, and the Prime Minister signed the Pan-American Treaty.
Okay.
And basically, in 2010, Canada, Mexico, and the United States are going to share the same borders. And the treaty calls for us to protect the southern Mexican border. That's the border that borders Guatemala and Belize.
But not our borders.
No, basically, the borders going to change, and that's Canada, Mexico, and the United States all going to...
Mr. LaRouche, do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I know. This thing is a political football. It's all nonsense. The problem is, if you care in the United States about the pressure on our borders from Mexico, why do we promote and demand, in point of fact, the impoverishment of northern Mexico? Because what we're doing is we're driving, on the one hand, we're driving people out of Mexico out of desperation. They are getting across the border, and we are winking about that. We go through drug runners often. They come over here. We want them here because they're very cheap labor, and they don't dare speak up, and they don't demand fair wages. So therefore, our object should be to stabilize the border relationships by stabilizing the economic situation on both sides of the borders. When this thing came up back in 1982, when I was collaborating with the president of Mexico then, López Portillo, we had a discussion about this matter, which I said, why don't we just simply have the Mexican consular officials be appointed inside the United States to identify all illegals in the United States or all entrants in the United States, and to give them consular representation and deal with the problem from that point on, and set up programs at cross-border areas such that people in Mexico who don't want to leave their families, who are only coming because they're absolutely desperate economically, why don't we foster the economic development of the areas of northern Mexico? And we will find that we don't have a problem of illegals of that type anymore.
Very good. Let's go back to the phones with Bernard. Go ahead, Bernard.
Yes, hello. I have a question for Mr. LaRouche.
Sure.
Well, look, the North American Union, the agreement that President Bush and the Prime Minister of Canada and Vicente Fox had, is going to put a myth to the so-called border security, because if you could build a 10-lane highway from Mexico, from the borders of Mexico all the way up to Canada, how are you going to secure the borders, Mr. LaRouche, of the United States of America? And doesn't NAFTA have a lot to do with displacing the campesinos, and that's the reason why immigration is as it is today? And thanks very much.
No, the whole idea is crazy. All this is, don't give Bush too much credit for intelligence. He doesn't have much. This poor man is an emotional, mental wreck. But he has obsessions. He's a madman with obsessions. He's like a wild-eyed drunk with obsessions. Now, all that's involved in this thing is some wise guys who come up with the idea that they can create a privatized superhighway, and they'll make a lot of money by taking off the charges on this highway. They're also going after most of the present highways in the United States, the superhighways. They're buying them up. And they're raising, for example, one case from $1.50 a passage to $6 a passage. Foreign companies moving in and buying it up. They don't care about the United States. They don't care about the U.S. border, the Canadian border, the Mexican border. All they care about is their friends want to make money. And they think this swindle is something they can make money on.
Mr. LaRouche, very quickly, we're coming to the end of the show here. Why did the Congress of the United States, why didn't they raise the minimum wage?
Because what Bush had done is tied to the minimum wage bill. They tied the condition of letting the super rich off with virtually no inheritance taxes. So therefore, what they did is they put a poison pill instead of putting the honest bill in to raise the minimum wage, which the majority of the members of Congress of both parties combined wished to do. So they put this stinker in there in the House of Representatives. Now that thing has been postponed of consideration by the Senate until the Senate comes back into session in September.
Okay. What do you think? Do you think we're going to see more wars in the Middle East this year, or is this it for a while?
If we do the right job, we're not going to have it. I see in Europe and Asia, there's a lot of pressure building up. There's also, the Bush administration has a crisis. We are at the limit in the United States of tolerating what the Bush administration has been. So some corrective action to bring this administration under control. What
would a Democratic presidency do if they're elected? Do you think they can fix what George messed up?
No, it's going to be bipartisan. It's not just going to be Democratic. You'll find that the way the thing will break is a significant number of Republicans will say, now this is before November. After November it could be different. But between now and the November election, there are a significant number of Republicans who are fed up.
Okay.
And they will...
Mr. LaRouche, unfortunately, this has to be it because we're completely out of time. We would love to have you back here soon. So thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in 5 minutes with Christopher Boulain. He had a problem with the Chicago police, so we'll talk about it in the next hour. 5 minutes, we'll be back. Be here.